Caroline's hands trembled as she balanced the crystal water pitcher, her reflection fracturing across its surface. Table 9. The number burned in her mind like a brand. She'd been at the Grandeur Hotel for exactly 3 weeks, and this was her first time serving the executive dining room, where one mistake could end her career before it started. Table 9, Caroline, don't mess this up. Mr. Rowland, the head server, didn't look up from his tablet. His voice carried the weight of a final warning. She nodded, throat tight, and pushed through the heavy oak doors. The woman sitting at table 9 was elegant in the way old money always is, pearls that probably cost more than Caroline's yearly rent, silver hair swept into a flawless chignon. But it was her eyes that caught Caroline. They held a loneliness so profound it felt like looking into a mirror. Beside her sat a man in his 40s, his suit sharp enough to cut glass. He was scrolling through his phone with the intensity of someone managing empires. He barely glanced up when Caroline approached. "Good afternoon. Welcome to the Grandeur. My name is Water. No ice for my mother. Sparkling for me." The man, she remembered his name from the reservation. David Hartwell, CEO of something massive, didn't make eye contact. "We'll need a few minutes with the menu." Caroline opened her mouth to respond, but he'd already returned to his phone. The woman, Mrs. Anita Hartwell, according to the reservation, smiled apologetically, but it didn't reach her eyes. Caroline poured the water, her movements practiced and invisible. She'd learned early that servers were furniture in places like this. Useful, silent, unseen. But as she set down Mrs. Hartwell's glass, the older woman looked directly at her and her lips moved. "Thank you, dear." At least, Caroline thought that's what she said. But the words had a strange quality, slightly off in rhythm and tone. Mrs. Hartwell glanced at her son, waiting for him to notice, to engage. He didn't. Caroline stepped back, and that's when she saw it, the tiny, flesh-colored hearing aid tucked behind Mrs. Hartwell's ear, nearly invisible against her skin. The air left Caroline's lungs. She was 16 again, sitting cross-legged on a worn carpet, her little brother's hands moving in front of her face. "You're doing it wrong, Caro," he'd signed, laughing silently. "It's like this." Danny had been 8, deaf since birth, and the most alive person she'd ever known. "Caroline?" Mr. Rowland's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Is there a problem?" She flinched. "No, sir. All good." But it wasn't good, because as she watched David Hartwell order for his mother, watched Anita nod along without understanding half of what was being discussed, Caroline felt something crack open inside her chest. "Before you continue with this story, I need to ask you something important. Have you ever felt invisible? Like the world was moving around you, but nobody really saw you? That's what this story is about being seen. If this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me about a time someone made you feel truly seen. And if you want to see how this moment changes everything, keep watching." Caroline returned to the kitchen, her mind spinning. She had a choice to make, and it terrified her. "Pick up for table 9, the sous chef called. Her hands moved automatically, arranging plates with mechanical precision. But her thoughts were with Danny, sweet, funny Danny who'd died 2 years ago in a car accident. She'd learned ASL for him, had become fluent in the language of hands and heart because she loved him. And now that language sat in her like unused currency, precious and pointless. She pushed back through the doors. David was talking into his Bluetooth, something about quarterly projections. Anita sat with her hands folded, staring at nothing, not reading the menu, not engaging, just existing in the space her son had brought her to. Caroline set down the appetizers. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Do it. Don't do it. Do it. Don't do it. She placed the final plate and, before she could stop herself, caught Mrs. Hartwell's eye. Then, slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hands and signed, "Hello. Can I help you with anything?" The effect was instantaneous. Anita's eyes went wide, her mouth opened, and then, oh God, then, her whole face transformed. It was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. Anita's hands flew up, signing rapidly. "You know sign language?" "Yes," Caroline signed back, aware that every second of this interaction was breaking protocol. "My brother was deaf." "Was. He passed away 2 years ago." Anita's expression crumpled with empathy. "I'm so sorry." David had finally looked up from his phone. "What? What's happening right now?" Caroline's voice shook. "Your mother is deaf, Mr. Hartwell. I was just asking if she needed anything." "She's hard of hearing," he corrected automatically. "She can read lips. She's fine." But Anita was signing to Caroline, tears brimming. "I'm not fine. I haven't been fine in years." Caroline felt her own eyes sting. She signed back, "Would you like me to interpret the menu? Explain the dishes directly to you?" "Please," Anita signed. "Please, yes." What happened next violated every rule of fine dining service. Caroline pulled up a chair, actually sat down at table 9, and went through the menu item by item, her hands dancing through descriptions of ingredients, preparation methods, flavor profiles. Anita asked questions, made jokes. Her hands moved with an expressiveness that her voice, carefully modulated to hide her deafness, never had. "The chef's special is butter-poached lobster with truffle risotto," Caroline signed. "But between you and me," she glanced conspiratorially around, "the lamb is better. The chef's grandmother's recipe. He makes it on Thursdays to remember her." Anita laughed, a real unguarded sound that made other diners turn. "The lamb, then. And tell me, Caroline, that is your name, yes? Tell me about your brother." So Caroline did. She told this stranger about Danny's terrible jokes, his love of skateboarding despite being completely unable to hear when cars were coming, how their mother worked 2 jobs to afford his school, how he died on a Tuesday, crossing a street he'd crossed 1,000 times, and how Caroline hadn't been there to watch for him. "He taught me everything," Caroline signed, her hands slowing. "Including this, including how to really see people." Anita reached across the table and gripped Caroline's hand, not a polite touch, a lifeline. David had set down his phone. For the first time since they'd arrived, he was watching his mother. Really watching. "I haven't seen her smile like that in—" He trailed off. "How long have you worked here?" "3 weeks, sir." "3 weeks." He shook his head slowly. "In 3 weeks, you've given her something I've failed to give her in years." The meal continued, but everything had shifted. Caroline served the food, and, breaking every rule in Mr. Rowland's handbook, she stayed. She interpreted. She laughed. She signed stories about the kitchen staff's drama, about the legendary head chef who'd once thrown a soufflé at a food critic. Anita signed back about her life, about board meetings where people talked around her, family dinners where conversation flowed past her like water around a stone, about the exhausting performance of pretending to understand, of nodding at appropriate moments, of existing in a hearing world that had no time for her to catch up. "People think accommodating means helping," Anita signed, "but helping isn't the same as including. David orders for me because he loves me, but love that silences isn't love. It's protection, and I'm so tired of being protected." Caroline glanced at David, who was watching this exchange with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Should I—" "Tell him," Anita signed. "Tell him everything I just said." So Caroline did, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. She watched David's face as understanding, real, painful understanding, dawned across his features. "Mom, His voice cracked. "I didn't know." I thought I was making things easier. Anita spoke aloud, her deaf accent more pronounced now that she'd stopped carefully controlling it. Easier for who, David? For me or for you? The silence that followed was enormous. Finally, David turned to Caroline. Could you teach me some basic signs so I can talk to her myself? Caroline's shift ended at 4 p.m. It was now 3:47, and she hadn't checked on any of her other tables in over an hour. Mr. Rowland was probably having an aneurysm. She was definitely getting fired. But she taught David Hartwell, billionaire, CEO, man who probably hadn't been told no in a decade, how to sign I love you, how to sign I'm sorry, how to sign I see you. His hands were clumsy, unused to expressing emotion through movement. But when he signed I see you to his mother, and she signed it back, Caroline had to turn away to hide her tears. Caroline? Mr. Rowland's voice through the earpiece was ice. My office. Now. She stood, smoothing her apron. I should go. Wait. David was on his feet. If she's in trouble, it's my fault. I'd like to speak to your manager. Oh, God, this was worse. Now she'd caused a scene and gotten a VIP involved in staff discipline. She was super fired. But in Mr. Rowland's office, with David Hartwell standing beside her like some corporate guardian angel, something unexpected happened. Mr. Rowland, David said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone used to running rooms. What's your policy on accessibility at the Grandeur? Rowland blinked. We comply with all ADA requirements, Mr. Hartwell. Compliance isn't inclusion. How many of your staff know sign language? None, to my knowledge. That changes today. David pulled out his phone. I'm arranging funding for mandatory sign language training for every front-of-house employee, basic conversational ASL, taught by certified deaf instructors. The Hartwell Foundation will cover all costs. Caroline's mouth fell open. And Caroline, David continued, turning to her, you're not in trouble. You're exceptional. My mother hasn't been that happy in years, that engaged, that seen. He used the word carefully, like he was still learning its weight. I'd like to offer you a scholarship, any degree program you want, education, interpretation, whatever calls to you. The foundation will cover tuition, books, housing, everything. The room tilted. What? You have a gift, Caroline. The gift of seeing people who the world has decided are invisible. The service industry might be where you are, but I don't think it's where you belong. Caroline looked at Mr. Rowland, expecting anger. Instead, she found something like respect in his eyes. Take the scholarship, he said quietly, and come back to teach us. God knows we need it. 3 months later, Caroline walked across a community college campus, her backpack heavy with textbooks on deaf education and ASL linguistics. Her phone buzzed. Anita Hartwell. Coffee this week? I want to hear about classes. And there's someone I'd like you to meet, another deaf woman who could use a friend who signs. Caroline smiled, typing back, Absolutely. Thursday? She'd kept her part-time position at the Grandeur, working weekends while she studied. But everything was different now. The hotel had completed its first round of ASL training. Servers greeted deaf guests in sign. The menu was available in ASL video format. Last week, a deaf couple had come in for their anniversary and cried when the hostess signed, Welcome home. They'd never been to a restaurant where they didn't have to explain themselves, Jenny, the hostess, told Caroline later. Where they weren't the problem to solve, they just got to be. Caroline understood that feeling intimately. She still talked to Danny, not with her voice, but with her hands. Every morning before class, she stood in front of his photo in her apartment and signed about her day, her struggles, her victories, the scholarship, the new friends, the future that was finally taking shape. "You did this, Danny," she signed to the photograph. "You taught me that communication isn't about words, it's about connection, and connection changes everything." That evening, Caroline returned to the Grandeur for her shift. A family was checking in at the front desk, parents and a teenage boy whose hands were moving rapidly, expressively, in a language Caroline knew by heart. The boy's mother looked frustrated, trying to explain something to Beauty at reception. The boy kept signing to his parents, but they were too focused on the check-in process to respond. Caroline had seen this before, was living it again. She approached with a smile and signed to the boy. "Hi, I'm Caroline. Welcome to the Grandeur. Can I help?" The boy's face lit up exactly the way Anita's had, the way Danny's always did when someone bothered to speak his language. And Caroline realized this was her life now. Not saving people, not rescuing them, just seeing them, over and over, until the world caught up. If this story moved you, don't just watch and leave. Hit that like button, drop a comment about a time someone saw you, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what really matters. Because sometimes the smallest gesture creates the biggest change. And sometimes all we need is for someone to look at us and sign, "I see you."